As we look at the quality categories and look at the basically 5 different categories that these ribs might fall into, they include prime, top choice, regular choice or low choice, select, and standard. Now you'll see those broken out as prime, then top choice, then choice, select, and standard because of the value that the carcasses had. And that value translates into these ribs, as well as the loins and the short loins that we've talked about earlier, as well as the loins and short loin classes. Because quality grade is extremely important from the food service and retail standpoints, retailers there is a higher demand for those cuts that would have a USDA grade of prime, top choice, okay, then choice, then select, and standard. Because of that demand, they're higher value cuts, and the carcasses that they come from are also higher value. Because of that, when we take a look at top choice, for example, versus regular choice, there are programs like Certified Angus Beef, Chairman's Reserve, Sterling Silver, and several others that require at least a modest or moderate amount of marbling to be in those programs. And packers, as well as restaurateurs, will pay more for cuts that have a modest or moderate amount of marbling. That has created a market for top choice beef and makes that top choice more valuable to the packer and also more valuable to the people that are selling that beef at food service. Therefore, as we look at these cuts, we're going to put that emphasis and we're going to look at those classes. For example, if we had 2 cuts that were yield grade 2, one was prime, one was top choice, we're going to put the prime, a high percentage of the time, the prime is going to be placed over the top choice. And as we can work that way down, we have a top choice versus a regular choice. Same yield grade, same amount of fat, same amount of muscle, very similar in those categories. Then the top choice is going to go over the choice. A choice versus select, similar amount of muscling and trimness. We're going to have, again, generally, the choice is going to be placed over the select. And remember, I said standard quite often, well, almost very often is going to go to the bottom regardless. Now, when do we consider placing an inferior or lower quality grade cut or exhibit or carcass over a rib that would have more marbling, a higher quality grade? For example, when would we put a select over a regular choice cut? Well, we would consider that as if we looked at the cuts and for example, the select cut here, if it was considerably trimmer and considerably more muscular, then we might start thinking about, am I going to place that lower quality grade cut over the higher quality grade cut? One number that we look at quite often, and that I'll teach my students, is that is if there's greater than 8/10 of an inch, 8/10 or greater, that if there is 8/10 or greater of an inch of fat opposite this ribeye, then I will start thinking that maybe this rib is too fat, and therefore I would start thinking about whether the cut that might have a lower quality grade would start going over and being placed over that higher quality grade cut. Again, not every cut is exactly the same, and therefore it's important to weigh all 3 criteria when we look at and evaluate these cuts. But if you, first of all, quality grade the cuts, then evaluate trimness and then muscling, you can pretty much ballpark those cattle within you can pretty easily put those cattle at least within the appropriate pairs as you place that class. Therefore, when you approach a class, you're going to look at quality grade first, then evaluate trimness, and then finally look at muscling and weigh those factors, putting more emphasis on quality grade as you look at that and evaluate and place that class.